We all know how it goes. Most of us live extremely boring lives, working boring jobs in order to maintain the tolerable existence we lead. Almost like a slightly happier version of Squidward's life. But that doesn't stop most of us from having fantasies about living a much more exciting life where we get to do all the things we can't and be all the things that we want to be. And that's where what's known as the escapist character comes in. Because as I've argued in probably 100 different videos at this point, people often watch movies to have a break from the world they live in, and the escapist character is the ultimate version of that. Because while a standard movie might just make a person feel better about life in general, an escapist character will actively have people living through them and in a way allow them to live out their wildest fantasies. And today, I'd like to argue why I believe that this isn't a bad thing. Because sure, too much escapism is not good. But too much of anything in life is bad. And I believe that as long as one doesn't get too caught up in it, there's nothing wrong with a person watching a movie with a character they would like to be every once in a while. Heck, under the right conditions, an escapist character can even help inspire a person to try and be more like them. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. And now would probably be a good time to say that there will be spoilers for pretty much every movie I bring up. So in case you don't want something ruined, you might just want to be careful. I won't be giving out any other spoiler warnings in this video. Okay, so just for those of you who aren't familiar with the concept of an escapist character, why do you think the Twilight series was so popular despite how utterly ridiculed and downright hated by many people it was? Because Bella was the textbook definition of an escapist character. A nice, polite woman that is told by everybody how beautiful she is, all the while having a boyfriend that's not only insanely attractive and has eyes only for her, but is also an insanely powerful vampire to boot. To put it simply, Twilight was always meant to be a female escapist fantasy, and it hit the mark so well that many fell for it hook, line, and sinker. It doesn't matter if it was, to be charitable, not written as well as it could have been. Because to many young women, the story was exactly the kind of escapism they wanted. But to give an example that's slightly more well regarded all around, take James Bond. I mean, this franchise has been around since 1962. How has it been able to stay afloat for so long? Well, there is the fact that most of the movies are pretty well written, a lot of them have great action, and the secret agent slash spy genre is something that just never gets old. But another, more subtle reason is because James Bond is pretty much what every man fantasizes about being. He's wealthy, suave, intelligent, has beautiful women falling all over him that he can effortlessly seduce, gets to go on extreme adventures that he always gets out of unscathed, and has saved the world on many an occasion. So while maybe a bit extreme compared to most examples, part of what makes James Bond so appealing is the fact that most men in the audience would kill to be him, and therefore live through him in everything he does. Heck, even as far as women go, he's a famous target for their ideal male fantasy. And it's for a similar reason that superhero and other science fiction type movies are usually so popular. Think about it. All of the classic superheroes like Clark Kent, Bruce Wayne, Peter Parker, Tony Stark, They're all either nice average Joes or are already living the high life. But either way, they all have superpowers that allow them to save the lives of others, defeat bad guys, and get the attention of beautiful women. Again, it all goes back to what I was just saying about James Bond. Or for a slightly less conventional example, there's the original Star Wars trilogy, which had two male escapist characters. Because Luke is just your average kid who feels like he's going to be stuck in a boring life forever, only to learn that his father was a great hero, he has the potential to unlock great power, and gets to save a princess while killing and ultimately defeating the bad guys. And that's all just in the first movie. Forget about once it's finally over. And on the other side, we have the suave, lovable rogue Han Solo, who always has a very cool demeanor, as well as gets to drive a spaceship. My point is, regardless of what a male's ultimate escapist fantasy is, Star Wars has them covered. Though what also gave it a leg up over other science fiction movies is that it also had an escapist character for the ladies as well, with Leia being a beautiful princess that both gets to be rescued and help right alongside the other heroes in that escape, is drawn and respected by all with her authority never questioned, and falls in love with said lovable rogue. Again, is it any wonder why people love the original Star Wars so much, in addition to everything else it had going for it? I mean, the escapist character aspect might be more obvious in Captain Kirk from Star Trek, but it's definitely present in the original Star Wars trilogy as well. In fact, that might even be an underlying reason so many didn't like the prequels, because George Lucas kind of destroyed the notion of the escapist character there. And then the sequels did the same thing, only a million times worse. But the point here is, none of these examples are bad or harmful. I mean, sure, it could be if a person decides to take these notions and desires to be the characters too far, but most adults know where to draw the line. They know what they're seeing isn't real and is frankly just there for fun. Because once again, when you really look at it, what have these people actually got? I mean, most do live in relative comfort, but they never amount to what they really want to. So for those people, and those who have it even worse, what's wrong with living through escapist characters? Nothing. Especially because if somebody wants it, they will find a story of that nature somewhere. But once again, if one knows anything about people, it's kind of obvious that escapist characters don't have a negative impact on most of them. And just to give an extreme example of that to prove my point here, take Ferris Bueller's Day Off, because this movie sums up escapism in a nutshell. Cameron, the neurotic best friend whose parents ignore him, is who the audience identifies with. He's who they relate to, while Ferris Bueller is the person every man wants to be. I mean, he's rich, he's beloved, he has a great girlfriend who's not only beautiful but happily goes along with his antics, and has quite possibly the best luck imaginable. To put it simply, Ferris Bueller is pretty much the textbook definition of an escapist character, because life goes for him the way everybody wishes their life would go. But despite that, Bueller isn't actually the greatest guy when all's said and done. He manipulates everyone around him, skips school to indulge in hedonism, takes advantage of people's kindness, and doesn't show any remorse for it. Really, the only thing that keeps him sympathetic is that he never crosses the line, so to speak, with his behavior, and the fact that he does show genuine care for the people around him, especially Cameron. But the only point that's relevant here is, while Ferris Bueller is an escapist character, he definitely isn't a role model. And what's important about that is that the audience can tell the difference between those two things. I mean, did juvenile delinquency shoot through the roof after the movie came out because everybody was suddenly trying to be like him? No. Because people don't generally try to become the people that they want to escape life through. Just because they live their fantasies through any given person doesn't mean that it has a negative effect on them. It's just a way for most people to feel better about themselves for a little while, and once it's over, they go about living their lives as normal. So once again, the idea of escapist characters being bad for people is honestly nonsense, because people are smarter than to try and blindly copy movie characters that they wish they were like. Most people know that an escapist character is just an outlet to live a fantasy or two through, and nothing more. In fact, if done right, an escapist character can actually encourage people to be more than they are. Because while it's rare, some have been motivated to better themselves after seeing certain characters because they either wanted to be more like them, or more realistically, they wanted to be better than their source of fantasy. They wanted to go out and prove that even though the fictional characters succeeded effortlessly, they were going to do what they did by actually challenging themselves and earning it. And a good example of a movie that demonstrates this point is actually The Mask. Because somewhat surprisingly, Stanley Ipkiss, at least at first, is a pretty good example of an escapist character. He's a shy, nice guy that gets walked all over by everybody, but then suddenly acquires the powers of a freaking cartoon character and gets to do things he had only ever dreamed of doing before. Again, it's pretty tempting for any given person to want to envy him, especially whenever he puts the mask on. But unlike most escapist characters, the consequences of his actions and escapist behavior actually start to catch up with him, and before he knows it, he's actually made everything a million times worse, and only manages to set things right by the skin of his teeth just in time. And moreover, he also realizes that he never actually needed the mask to get everything he ever wanted, which mainly came down to respect and a beautiful woman who would actually care about him. All he really needed was confidence, both to stand up for himself and believe that his crush might actually like him for who he was. And in the end, he decides that he no longer needs the mask because, even with all the powers it can give him, it already gave him the one thing of value he could ever get from it. To put it another way, this movie is actually a great metaphor for the value of escapist characters. Because Stanley Ipkiss is your average moviegoer, the mask is the escapist character, its powers are the escapist elements to that character, and Ipkiss's confidence is what the audience member actually needs. Because once again, for all of the powers the mask gives him, it ends up causing him nothing but trouble, except in the fact that it gives him the confidence boost he desperately needs. And once he has that, he's already able to live his ideal life. And the same applies to the audience. Because obviously an escapist character can't actually give any given person what they envy them for, as most of the time that's generally impossible, but an escapist character can give the inspiration a person needs to go out and live whatever their dream actually is. And in the end, that's often more valuable than what the escapist character actually has themselves. Because just how Stanley Ipkiss gets rid of the mask, since the confidence it gave him is all he really needed, what a real-life person needs to become more like the people they try to live through is generally more mundane and achievable than they realize. Now, obviously, what I'm saying here doesn't apply to every escapist character or person who lives through them, as I'm only talking in broad, very general terms here. The only point I'm trying to make here is that escapist characters aren't usually harmful for people and can even under the right conditions help them to better themselves. Because once again, people are smart enough to know not to just copy the things they see any given person they might envy doing in real life, and are apt to learn a more valuable, abstract lesson from them, if anything. But even if they just want to live through a given character for a little while to escape their boring existence, that's perfectly fine too. Again, as long as they don't take their fantasies too far, there's nothing wrong with that. Sure, there will always be those who take it to the extreme, but those cases are usually very rare and few and far between. Because as pretty much all of the examples I've gone over prove, escapist characters are much more likely to provide people with a harmless relief from their lives at worst. And honestly, considering what the average person's life is really like, some would even say that well-written, escapist movies are frankly owed to them every once in a while. Alright, I think I've made my point with all of this quite clear. So now I'd like to hear from all of you. Do you believe that there's nothing wrong with people living through escapist characters so long as they don't take it too far and that they can even help them out occasionally? Or do you still believe people shouldn't indulge so much in escapism and that it can be harmful for them? Please feel free to let me know in the comments below. And sorry if I seem to be generalizing a bit when it came to describing male and female fantasies, as everybody is obviously different and will have different things they fantasize about. But the truth is that those are what most people would find ideal in an escapist character, and the extreme success of those given examples only proves that exact point. But if you disagree with me on that or anything else I said, that is perfectly fine. You are entitled to your own opinion, and if you think I've got this topic all wrong, that is completely okay. And thank you all for watching. I very appreciate it, and I hope to see you all next time.